Part 1. Morning. The evening light slanted through the bedroom window, catching dust motes in its amber glow. In bed, his eyes closed, breathing slow and steady, the daydream began to unfold like a flower opening to sun. Hashtag sunlight, warm and gentle, filtered through pale curtains. She stirred, blinking awake to a room that felt entirely hers. The nightdress, soft cotton with a delicate print, moved easily as she stretched, the fabric soft against her skin. For a moment, she simply lay there, savouring the peaceful quiet of morning, the weight of sleep still pleasant in her limbs. The alarm hadn't gone off yet. She had a few minutes of this perfect stillness, this sense of being exactly who she was meant to be. When she finally sat up, her hair fell across her shoulders, sleep-tangled and waiting to be tamed. She padded across the carpet to her dresser, where everything was laid out and ready. The school uniform hung on the back of her door, white blouse crisp and waiting, black cardigan folded neatly, the pleated skirt that would swish when she walked. On the dresser, her tights, her tie with its red and silver stripes, a hairbrush, and the scrunchie she'd chosen the night before, a deep blue that complemented everything perfectly. First, though, the bathroom. The mirror there greeted her with a face she recognized, a face that felt right. She washed carefully, the water cool and refreshing, taking time with each step of the routine, brushed her teeth, applied a subtle lip balm. Nothing dramatic, just the small rituals that made her feel put together and ready. Back in her room, she began to dress with quiet ceremony, carefully selecting her favorite underwear and pulling them on gently. She picked up her tights and sat on the edge of her bed for these, gathering each leg carefully, smoothing out any wrinkles as she pulled them up. They were opaque black, practical and comfortable, and they made her feel properly coordinated. Then the blouse, buttoning it carefully, smoothing the fabric. The skirt next, zipping it at the side, adjusting the waistband until it sat just right. The cardigan came next, soft knit that felt like a gentle hug around her shoulders. And finally the tie, which took 2 attempts to get the length right, but she didn't mind. There was something satisfying about the small challenge, the muscle memory of looping and pulling until the knot sat neat at her collar. Smart black polished shoes finished the look. She stood before the mirror again, this time full length, and allowed herself a moment of appreciation. The uniform looked exactly as it should. She looked exactly as she should. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and smiled at her reflection. Not a practiced smile, but a real one, spontaneous and bright. Her hair needed attention though. She gathered it all back, feeling the pleasant pull at her scalp as she smoothed it into place. The ponytail sat high, and she secured it with the blue scrunchie, then pulled the length over her shoulder to check it was straight. Perfect. When she moved her head, it swung gently, a metronome of normalcy. Her school bag waited by the door, already packed from the night before. Pencil case, notebooks, the novel for English class, her planner with its doodles in the margins. She checked one more time. Yes, everything was there. She slipped her phone into her cardigan pocket, grabbed the bag, and took one last look around her room. The morning sun was brighter now, promising a beautiful day. She headed downstairs, calling out a cheerful goodbye to the vague warmth of family somewhere in the house, and stepped out the front door. The air was fresh, with just a slight chill that made her grateful for her cardigan. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder, felt her ponytail swing as she turned, and started down the path towards school. The walk was familiar and comfortable. Trees lined the street, their leaves rustling in a gentle breeze. She could hear birds singing, distant traffic, the hum of a normal Tuesday morning. 2 streets over, she spotted them, her friends, walking together, laughing about something. "Wait up," she called, breaking into a light jog. They turned, faces lighting up with recognition and welcome. "We thought you'd sleep in," one of them teased. "As if I'd miss walking with you lot," she replied, falling into step beside them naturally. "Did you finish the maths homework?" another asked, and just like that they were deep in conversation, comparing answers, groaning about the difficult questions, segueing into talk about weekend plans that felt impossibly far away. Someone linked arms with her as they walked, a casual gesture of friendship that sent warmth blooming in her chest. They swung their joined arms a little, exaggerating their steps, and everyone laughed. The school gates came into view, that familiar building where she spent her days. But today, this imagined, perfect today, she wasn't approaching it with dread or resignation. She was walking toward it with friends by her side, chattering and giggling. Just another girl heading to another day of school. They passed through the gates together, a small group of friends, and she felt the profound simplicity of belonging settle around her shoulders like a favourite blanket. The day had only just begun. Part 2. School morning. The corridor buzzed with the familiar chaos of arrival. Locker doors clanging, voices overlapping, the squeak of trainers on polished floors. She navigated through it all with her friends, their little group staying loosely together as they made their way to their classrooms. "I cannot believe Miss Patterson actually expects us to remember all those French verbs," one friend groaned, spinning her combination lock. "I made flashcards," she offered, pulling open her school bag. "I can quiz you before the lesson if you want. You're literally a lifesaver." "Yes, please." She smiled, placing her bag on the floor and pulling out cards and handing them to her friend, followed by just what she needed for morning lessons. Her planner, her pencil case, the one with the little enamel pins attached to the zip. A friend leaned against the wall, still talking about a show they'd both been watching. "But did you see the ending, though?" I actually gasped out loud. "I know. I had to immediately text." She caught herself, adjusting her books in her arms. "I was dying to talk to someone about it. We need to have a proper discussion at lunch." No spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it yet, though. The warning bell rang, a 5-minute reminder that sent everyone into slightly more purposeful motion. They split off, with quick see you laters and waves, heading to different rooms. Her first room was on the second floor, and she climbed the stairs with a steady rhythm, her skirt moving with each step in a way that felt natural and right. Other students streamed past in both directions, some rushing, some ambling, everyone caught in that peculiar between state of not quite awake and not yet focused. She slipped into her classroom just as the second bell sounded. Her seat was near the window, and she shared the table with 3 other girls who were already settled in, comparing nail polish colours. "Morning," she greeted, setting her things down. "Oh, I love your scrunchie," one of them said immediately. "That blue is gorgeous. Thanks. I wasn't sure if it matched, but it totally does. Very put together." The compliment settled warm in her chest as she sat down. Their teacher was taking the register, calling out names in alphabetical order. When hers came, her real name, the one that fit, she answered clearly, "Here, miss." Checking complete, announcements made, something about a jumble sale on Friday, chess club looking for new members. They had a few minutes of freedom before first lesson. One of her table mates pulled out a small mirror and some lip gloss. "Can I borrow that after?" she asked. "Course. It's the strawberry one. Smells amazing." They passed it around the table, each taking a turn, casual and easy. She applied just a touch, enough to feel finished, and handed it back with thanks. First lesson was English, and they walked there together, a different configuration of friends this time, since they had different timetables, but no less comfortable. The English room smelled like old books and dry Typex, and sunlight streamed through high windows, making dust dance in golden shafts. She settled into her usual seat, this time at a table with 2 girls she'd been friends with since primary 3. They were already debating something about the novel they were reading. But that's exactly the point, though. He doesn't realise what he's doing is wrong until it's too late. "I suppose it's so frustrating to read." She pulled out her copy of the book, dog-eared and annotated in the margins. "I kind of like that it's frustrating. It feels more realistic." "See, that's what I think too." Their teacher arrived, and the lesson began properly. They discussed themes and symbolism, and she found herself raising her hand several times, contributing thoughts that felt clear in her mind. Her teacher nodded approvingly at one of her points, and she felt that quiet glow of being seen and heard. During independent work time, she bent over her notebook, writing steadily. Beside her, one friend was doodling in the margins of her notes, tiny flowers and stars. Another was chewing the end of her pen, staring at the board thoughtfully. "What did you put for number 3? The pen chewer whispered. She angled her notebook so her friend could see, and they compared answers quietly, heads bent close together. The teacher didn't mind. As long as they were working, a bit of collaboration was encouraged. The lesson ended with homework assigned, inch the chapter, and write a paragraph response, and they packed up their things with the particular relief that comes from completing a task well. Morning break was 15 minutes of freedom. They spilled out into the corridor and made their way to their usual spot, a bench near the library, where the sun hit just right and it wasn't too crowded. Someone had brought biscuits from home and passed them around. She took one gratefully, realizing she'd been hungrier than she thought. They sat in a loose circle, some on the bench, some on the ground with their backs against the wall, and talked about everything and nothing. Did anyone else completely forget about the science quiz today? Collective groans. I studied, but only because my mum made me. What's it even on? Cellular respiration? And photosynthesis, I think. She pulled out her phone and checked her notes app where she'd typed up a summary last night. Yeah, both. And something about enzymes. Can I look at your notes? Sure, here. They huddled around her phone, cramming in last-minute revision, and she felt useful, helpful, part of something. One friend plaited another's hair while listening. Someone else was texting, grinning at whatever response she was getting. The bell rang too soon, as break bells always did, and they scattered again to different lessons. She had history next, in a room that was always slightly too warm. Her table here was a mixed group, 2 girls and a boy who was friendly and quiet and never made her feel out of place. They were studying World War I, and the teacher showed them propaganda posters, asking them to analyse the imagery and messaging. What do you think this poster is trying to make people feel? The teacher asked the class. She studied the image. A woman and child, a soldier in the background. Maybe guilt? Like, if you don't enlist, you're letting down your family? Exactly right. That's a key emotion these posters tried to evoke. They spent the rest of the lesson in groups, creating their own propaganda poster for a made-up cause. Her group decided on join the library revolution, read more books. And they had far too much fun with it, drawing exaggerated images and coming up with dramatic slogans. When they presented it to the class, everyone laughed in the right places, and she felt the buoyancy of shared creativity. By the time the lesson ended, her stomach was genuinely growling. Lunchtime. The cafeteria was controlled chaos as always, the clatter of trays, the mixed smells of different foods, the roar of hundreds of voices competing to be heard. She grabbed a tray and went through the line, choosing jacket potato with cheese and beans, a bottle of water, and an apple for after. Her group had claimed their usual table near the windows, and she wound her way through the crowd to join them. 7 or 8 of them today, all squished together, bags piled beneath the table. Finally, we've been waiting to talk about the show. Okay, everyone who's seen the latest episode? A show of hands. 2 people hadn't, and they covered their ears dramatically while the rest of them launched into animated discussion, interrupting each other, gasping and laughing. She ate her lunch slowly, savouring both the food and the conversation. Someone asked about her jacket potato and she offered them a bite. Someone else showed them a video on her phone that had everyone in stitches. Your laugh is so contagious, one friend told her, grinning. She felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. Yours is worse. You do that snort thing. I do not snort. You do so. They dissolved into giggles again, the kind that feed on themselves until your stomach hurts and your eyes water. Lunch periods stretched on, golden and easy. They talked about the weekend coming up, who might go to the cinema, whether they should try that new cafe in town. Someone was having a birthday party soon. Plans were made, tentative but exciting. When the bell rang for afternoon lessons, they cleared their trays with reluctant acceptance. The day was more than half over, but there was still time, still more of this to savour. She adjusted her ponytail, which had come slightly loose, and gathered her things. Afternoon lessons awaited, and then the walk home, and then the quiet evening. But for now, surrounded by friends in the cafeteria's bright bustle, she felt entirely content. Part 3. School afternoon lessons always had a different quality. The day's energy shifting from morning brightness to something slower, warmer, more contemplative. The sun had moved across the sky, and now it slanted through classroom windows at a lazy angle, making everything feel gilded and slightly drowsy. First up was art, which was always a welcome respite. The art room was tucked away at the end of a corridor, a space that smelled of paint and paper and possibility. Tables were scattered with ongoing projects, and the walls were covered with student work at various stages of completion. She settled at a large table with 5 other girls, pulling out her portfolio and the pieces she'd been working on. They were doing a project on identity and self-expression, and she'd chosen to work with mixed media, collage elements, paint, some pressed flowers she'd collected and dried between the pages of an old book. "Oh, I love what you're doing with the blues and silvers," the girl beside her said, leaning over to look. "Thanks. I'm trying to figure out the composition still. Does it feel too busy on the left?" They both tilted their heads, considering. "Maybe a little? What if you added something small over here?" she pointed. "Just to balance it?" "Yes, that's exactly what it needs." The teacher circulated through the room, offering guidance and encouragement. When she reached their table, she paused to look at the work spread before them. "This is coming along beautifully," she said, gesturing to the piece. "I love how you're using texture to convey emotion. Keep going with that instinct." She glowed under the praise, returning to her work with renewed focus. Around her, quiet conversation flowed, someone asking to borrow the gold paint, another humming softly to herself, the scratch of pencils and swish of brushes creating a gentle rhythm. Time moved differently in art. She lost herself in the careful placement of each element, the blend of colours, the way everything slowly came together into something that felt deeply hers. When the bell rang, it startled her. Surely it hadn't been a whole hour already. They cleaned their spaces, washing brushes and wiping down palettes. Hands stained with paint that wouldn't quite come off. She didn't mind. There was something satisfying about the evidence of creation on her fingertips. "See you tomorrow." The girls at her table cooled as they left, and she waved, still putting away her materials. Next was maths, which was less dreamy but had its own satisfactions. She sat with two friends who were both better at maths than she was, but they never made her feel slow. Instead, they patiently explained concepts when she got stuck, drawing diagrams and working through problems step by step. "So if X is here, and we're solving for Y, oh, I see it now. You have to rearrange this first." Exactly. They worked through a set of equations, checking each other's answers, celebrating small victories when they got a particularly tricky one right. The teacher was explaining something about quadratic formulas at the board, and she copied down the notes carefully, determined to understand it even if it didn't come as naturally as words and art did. One friend passed her a note, just a doodle of a cat with an absurdly long body, wearing a graduation cap. She stifled a laugh and drew a quick response, the cat receiving a diploma that said "Very Long Scholar." They grinned at each other, then dutifully returned to their equations. The final lesson of the day was geography, and by now the afternoon sun was properly golden, that late day light that made everyone slightly wistful. They were studying climate and ecosystems, looking at maps and data, discussing the impact of human activity. She found herself engaged despite the creeping tiredness of a full school day. The teacher showed them satellite images of deforestation, and they had a serious discussion about sustainability and responsibility. She contributed her thoughts, and others built on them, and it felt like the kind of conversation that mattered. Young people thinking about the world they were inheriting. For the last 20 minutes, they worked in groups on a research project. Her group was studying coral reef ecosystems, and they bent over laptops and textbooks, dividing up tasks and making plans for the presentation they were tasked with. "Can you work on the section about symbiotic relationships?" one group member asked. "You're really good at explaining complex things clearly." "Sure, I can do that." They exchanged email addresses to share documents, made a group chat to coordinate, and by the time the final bell rang, they had a solid plan in place. The sound of that last bell was like a release chair's scraping back, bags zipping closed, a collective exhale from everyone in the room. The school day was done. She packed up with everyone else, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Her cardigan had gotten a bit rumpled throughout the day, and she straightened it, tucked a stray hair behind her ear. In the corridor, the flow of students was all moving in one direction now, toward the exits, toward freedom, toward home. She found her friends near the main doors, 3 of them, the ones who walked in roughly the same direction as her. They were already chattering about the day, recapping moments, complaining good-naturedly about homework. "Ready?" one asked as she approached, and she nodded. They spilled out into the afternoon together. The air was cooler now, but still pleasant, that perfect autumn temperature where a cardigan was exactly enough. The sky was blue with wisps of cloud, and the light had that particular quality that made everything look like a photograph, saturated, beautiful, temporary. They walked in a loose group, sometimes in pairs when the pavement narrowed, sometimes spreading out when it widened. The conversation flowed easily, hopping from topic to topic with no particular thread. "Did you see the way Mark fell asleep in history? His head was literally on the desk. I felt bad for him, though. He said he'd been up late with his little brother who was sick. That's fair. I'd probably fall asleep too." They stopped at the corner shop, a ritual so familiar it happened without discussion. Inside, they deliberated over the selection of sweets and drinks, pooling change, debating the merits of different chocolate bars. She chose a bottle of lemonade and a packet of strawberry laces, comfort purchases after a long day. They paid and emerged back into the sunlight, immediately opening their treats and sharing them around. "These are so good." One friend mumbled around a mouthful of chocolate. "You always say that about whatever you buy." Because it's always true. They walked on, slightly sticky-fingered now, still talking. Someone brought up a celebrity they all followed on social media, and that led to a discussion about a recent music video, which led to someone singing a few bars, which made everyone laugh. At the end of the next road, one friend split off. "This is me. See you tomorrow. Text later. Will do." They continued, now 3. The conversation got a bit more personal, quieter. One friend was worried about her grandmother who was in hospital. Another was excited about a family trip coming up. She listened, offered support, shared her own small concerns about the maths test next week. Another street, another friend departing with waves and promises to chat online that evening. Now they were 2, walking in comfortable near silence. Her last remaining companion was someone she'd known for years, the kind of friend where silence wasn't awkward, it was just another form of communication. "Today was good," her friend said eventually. "Yeah," she agreed, smiling. "It really was. You seem happy." "I am. I feel—" She searched for the word. "Content, I guess?" Her friend bumped her shoulder gently. "You should feel like this all the time. Maybe someday." They reached the final parting point. Her friend turned left. She would continue straight. "Tomorrow?" her friend said, and it was both a question and a promise. "Tomorrow," she confirmed. She walked the last few streets alone, but not lonely. Her ponytail swayed with each step. Her bag bounced against her hip. The late afternoon sun warmed her shoulders through her cardigan, and she could feel the gentle ache of tired feet that had walked all day. Her house appeared around the corner, familiar and welcoming. She quickened her pace slightly, suddenly eager to be home, to shed the uniform and slip into comfortable clothes, to exist in her own space for the evening. She reached the front door, fished her key from her bag, and let herself in. "I'm home." She called into the house, to the vague warmth of family somewhere beyond. The school day was complete. Now came the gentle evening, time that belonged only to her. Part 4. Evening. The house wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, the particular smell of home, the creak of floorboards she knew by heart, the distant sound of someone moving in another room. She kicked off her shoes by the door, feeling immediate relief as her feet met the cool floor. Upstairs, her room waited exactly as she'd left it that morning. She dropped her bag by her desk with a satisfying thud and went straight to her dresser, ready to shed the uniform and slip into something more comfortable. The cardigan, then the blouse came off, hung carefully on hangers so they wouldn't wrinkle for tomorrow. The skirt next, the tie loosened and set aside. She peeled off the tights, always the best part of getting home, that feeling of freedom, and stood for a moment in just her underwear, stretching her arms above her head. From her drawer she pulled out her favourite leggings, soft and worn in, dark grey, with a subtle pattern. Then a t-shirt that made her smile every time she wore it, oversized and cosy, pale pink, with a tiny embroidered moon on the chest pocket. She'd found it in a local shop months ago, and it had instantly become a staple. Dressed now in clothes that felt like a hug, she flopped backwards onto her bed with a contented sigh. The mattress welcomed her, and she stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the day settle into memory. All those small, perfect moments. The morning with friends, the compliment on her scrunchie, the art teacher's praise, the shared laughter at lunch, the golden walk home. Her phone buzzed beside her. She raised it out to find messages already accumulating in the group chat. Did anyone actually understand what Mr. Davies was saying in the last 5 min of geography? No, literally, I zoned out completely something about tectonic plates. I think I have the notes if anyone needs them the best. She smiled, typing a quick response before scrolling through other notifications. A few Instagram posts from friends, someone's story about their cat, a meme that made her laugh out loud. She stayed there for a while, just existing in that pleasant post-school haze, not quite ready to be productive, but not quite restless either. Through her window, she could see the sky beginning its slow shift toward evening, the blue deepening, the light getting richer. Eventually, she roused herself. Homework wouldn't do itself, unfortunately. She went to her desk and started unpacking her bag, pulling out books and folders, her pencil case, the various papers that had accumulated throughout the day. Her planner told her what needed doing: finish the English chapter and write the response, review those French verbs, complete the maths problems from the textbook. She decided to start with English, since she was most interested in that. But first, music. She pulled up her favourite playlist on her phone, the one she'd been curating for months, and set it on her desk. Soft indie music filled the room, not too loud, but present enough to make the space feel lived in. Opening the novel, she found her place and began to read. The story drew her in quickly. She'd been genuinely enjoying this book, which didn't always happen with assigned reading. She read with a pencil in hand, underlining passages that struck her, making tiny notes in the margins. When she finished the chapter, she pulled out her notebook and began drafting her response. The teacher wanted them to discuss character development, and she had thoughts, lots of them. Her handwriting flowed across the page, and she lost herself in the analysis, in the pleasure of articulating something she understood. One assignment down, she stretched, rolling her shoulders, and took a quick break to check her phone again. More messages in the group chat, now discussing weekend plans that were starting to take shape. She added her thoughts, made tentative commitments, felt that pleasant anticipation of good things coming. French verbs next. She pulled out the flashcards she'd made and tested herself, saying each one aloud quietly. Some she knew instantly, others took more thought. She made a separate pile of the ones she struggled with, determined to review those extra times before the test. Avoir, to have. J'aille, tu as, illa. The music shifted to a song she particularly loved, and she hummed along while conjugating verbs, an odd but pleasant combination of activities. Maths was last, and she approached it with less enthusiasm but steady determination. She worked through each problem methodically, checking her answers in the back of the book, feeling a small swell of satisfaction when she got them right. When she got stuck, she thought back to how her friends had explained it earlier, recreating their diagrams in her own notebook. By the time she finished, the light outside had shifted noticeably, no longer afternoon, properly evening now. She glanced at the clock and was surprised to find that nearly 2 hours had passed. Time well spent, though. All her homework was complete, ready to be packed back into her bag for tomorrow. She stood and stretched properly this time, walking to her window to look out at the street below. A few people were out walking dogs, someone was getting into a car, normal evening activities on a normal street. The sky was painted in soft colours now, pale orange and pink bleeding into deeper blue. Her stomach reminded her that it had been a while since lunch. She should probably go downstairs, see what was happening with dinner, but she lingered for a moment longer in her room, this space that felt entirely hers. On impulse, she went to her mirror, the full-length one propped against the wall, and looked at herself. Not critically, not searching for flaws, just looking. The comfortable clothes, the hair now loose around her shoulders after she'd taken out the ponytail, the relaxed posture of someone in their own space. She looked content. She looked like herself. The thought brought a soft smile to her face, and she held her own gaze in the mirror for a moment longer before turning away. Downstairs, she could hear the sounds of evening, maybe cooking, maybe television, the ordinary domestic symphony of a weeknight. She should join it, be part of it. But first, she saved her favourite song from the playlist that was still playing, adding it to another collection. She tidied her desk slightly, stacking the completed homework neatly. She plugged her phone in to charge. Then, feeling peaceful and accomplished and thoroughly herself, she padded out of her room and down the stairs, ready to spend the rest of the evening in whatever quiet way it unfolded. The day, this perfect imagined day, had been everything she'd hoped for. Ordinary and extraordinary, all at once. Just a normal Tuesday, lived as exactly who she was meant to be. And perhaps the best part was knowing she could return to it, to this dream, whenever she needed. It was hers to keep, hers to treasure, a promise she held close. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance, another beginning. But for now, this evening was enough. Part 5. Returning the evening light in the imagined room began to soften, to blur at the edges like watercolour bleeding into paper. The sounds grew distant, the music fading to a gentle hum, the house settling into a comfortable quiet that felt less like ending and more like gentle transition. She stood at the bottom of those imagined stairs, hand on the banister, and felt the day begin to release her. Not suddenly, not harshly, but with the tenderness of something precious being carefully set aside for safekeeping. The colours dimmed, warm and golden, giving way to the softer twilight of letting go. Hashtag eyes opened slowly in a different room, the real one, where evening light slanted through familiar curtains. The same body, but dressed differently. The same person, but existing in a different shape, a different name that didn't quite fit right. For a moment, there was the disorientation of return, that strange feeling of having been somewhere else entirely, of having lived hours in the space of minutes. The daydream clung like morning mist, beautiful and ephemeral. The schoolboy, because that's what the world called him, even if it never felt quite true, sat up slowly on his bed. His room looked exactly as it had before the daydream began. The same posters on the walls, the same scattered books, the same everything. But he felt different, or perhaps not different, perhaps more himself than he'd felt all day. His school uniform from today hung over his desk chair, the boys' version with its trousers and jumper. It felt like a costume now, after having spent time in the dream wearing what felt right. He reached for the journal on his nightstand, a private thing, kept tucked away, and opened it to a fresh page. The pen felt good in his hand, solid and real. He began to write, capturing the day before it could fade completely. Today in the daydream, I woke up as her again. The nightdress, the uniform that actually felt like mine, the ponytail swinging as I walked. I went through a whole school day, English and art and all of it, and I was just one of the girls. Not trying to be, not pretending, just being. It felt so normal. That's the thing that gets me every time. Not dramatic or special, just normal. Sharing lip gloss and complaining about homework and walking home with friends. Being seen as who I actually am. He paused, pen hovering over paper, thinking about that moment at the mirror in the dream, the way he'd looked at himself and felt content, whole. Sometimes I wonder if other people feel this way, if they have a version of themselves that only exists in their head, a life they live in imagination because they can't quite reach it in reality. Or maybe they don't need to. Maybe for them, what they see in the mirror already matches who they are inside. I hope I get there someday, not just in daydreams, but for real. The words sat on the page, honest and aching and hopeful all at once. He closed the journal and set it carefully back in its hiding place. Outside his window, the real evening was deepening into night. Somewhere in the house, he could hear the ordinary sounds of family, of life continuing in its usual patterns. Tomorrow would be another school day, the real kind, where he'd wear the wrong uniform and answer to the wrong name, and try to navigate a world that didn't quite have a space carved out for who he was. It would be harder than the dream. It usually was. But he had the dream to return to. He could close his eyes any evening and slip back into that other life, that better-fitting existence. He could wake up as her, get dressed in the uniform that felt right, walk to school with friends who saw him clearly. It wasn't enough, not permanently, not really, but it was something. It was a promise to himself, a reminder that the person in the daydream was real too. Just as real as the boy everyone else saw, maybe more real, in the ways that mattered. He stood and went to his window, looking out at the same street he'd imagined walking down earlier. A few people were out, living their ordinary evenings. The world continued turning, indifferent to internal struggles, to dreams deferred. But not forever deferred, he thought. Not if he could help it. Someday, maybe soon, maybe not, but someday, the daydream and reality would merge. The girl in his imagination would walk out into the real world. The ponytail would be actual hair, the skirt would be real fabric, the name would be one everyone used without question. Until then, he had these moments, these carefully constructed hours where everything aligned, where he could exist exactly as intended, where the reflection in the mirror matched the person inside. He touched the window glass gently, as if making a promise to that future self. Tomorrow, he whispered to his reflection, and he meant both the immediate tomorrow, with all its challenges, and the larger tomorrow that waited somewhere ahead. The one where he wouldn't need to daydream anymore, because he'd be living the truth every day. The room was nearly dark now, just the faint glow of streetlights illuminating familiar shapes. He should probably go downstairs, be present for dinner, exist in the world as it currently was. But he allowed himself one more moment with the daydream, feeling its warmth settle into his chest, like a coal that would keep burning, steady and patient. She was real. The girl in the dream, the girl he'd spent the day as, she was real and valid and waiting. And someday, somehow, everyone else would see her too. With that thought held close and precious, he finally turned from the window and moved toward his door, ready to face the evening ahead. The daydream folded itself away neatly, stored safe, ready to be unfolded again whenever it was needed, ready to sustain him until the day when dreams and reality became one and the same.